Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Angels and Destiny Show. Why is this show called this, you may ask? So I'll tell you. The accepted meaning of angel is messenger, and the accepted meaning of destiny is to make firm establish. So my guest and I bring you messages to establish what you need to know in the present. And of course, I like working with angels and the calmness they bring. Now, in a moment, I will introduce you to my wonderful guest, Nathan Simmonds. But before that, I'd like to say thank you so much for watching the show live or at a later date, as it means a lot to me to connect with like minded people. Now, if you've never met me before, then my name is Ray, and I'm a guide who helps you remember your divine presence so you can heal your past, create your future, and transform your present to raise your consciousness, understand your spiritual path and take charge of your destiny so you can spread your wings and soar. I'm the founder of Radiant Angel Energy, and I use angelic Reiki, future life progression, past life regression, guided meditation, and angel oracle cards to assist you in remembering why you are here, your spiritual path, and the clarity on the next steps to take. I also offer a multidimensional virtual retreat, several transformational packages, a journey through lifetimes, a 6-week guided meditation series to help you gain confidence, and various workshops, including Divine Presence. Now, each episode of this show covers various themes of your journey, a mini guided meditation or angel oracle card reading with the wisdom of my wonderful guests, like today's guest, Nathan Simmonds, and the truth behind trauma. Now, Nathan is a FreeMind Rapid-Change Hypnotherapist, as well as a qualified leadership coach who's worked in a number of FTSE 250 organisations. With 24 years in leadership positions, 15 years in leadership development, combined with an eclectic mix of incredible life experiences, really amazing life experiences, from living in Brazil to training in martial arts and managing the customer services of Time and Fortune magazine, while living in Amsterdam, all the way through to healing himself of Crohn's disease. Now, Nathan is well versed in healing the past and bringing the best out of people, both individually and in teams. Now working with mostly healers, therapists, and conscious coaches, Nathan focuses most of his time working with the wounded child, healing childhood trauma, helping people to reconcile with their past, rewire their programming, and shifting limiting beliefs, and enabling them to connect, reparent, and remember who they truly are. Now, he's a kind, caring, and unfazed by much of what the world has laid on people. And he speaks from a place of personal knowledge that helps support and guide his clients to where they need to be, to a place beyond the old narrative and negative inner critic, so they can be who they are designed to be. All of us carry something, and that something is flavouring the world in which we live and create. So, showing up as either self sabotage, people pleasing, perfectionism, codependency, independency. And when we heal these parts of our personality and find compassion for all the elements of ourselves, we can actually transform our personal reality. So, without further delay, hello, Nathan, and welcome to the Angels and Destiny show. How are you today?
Doing all right, Ray. Thank you for having me. It's really appreciated.
Brilliant. Thank you for coming on. So, before we get into this fascinating conversation, I want to remind you that not only can you share this video, but you can also ask questions, leave comments and thoughts, as both Nathan and I want to be part of this conversation. So, please don't be shy. So, Nathan, why don't you tell us more about your journey and the truth behind trauma?
Okay, so the trauma is kind of this the zeitgeist of the modern era. It's this really big thing, but wrapped up in such a small word. And what we have to understand is the modern existence that we live in is actually built and structured on trauma, and it has been for hundreds of thousands of years, if not since the beginning of time. We have to understand that what we call this 3D structure that we're living in has actually been fabricated on and built upon layers of trauma that we have experienced generation after generation after generation, whether that's been inflicted and directed from leadership, political groups, community, society, clan, tribal warfare, whatever it is. But that stuff has been passed down generation upon generation upon generation until it's got down to an individual basis, which is, all of us. And how we're going to handle this, how we're going to process this thing. But we seem to think that trauma is surviving a natural disaster. We seem to think that trauma is surviving a car crash or some horrendous accident. And actually trauma is that, but it's also the last words that your first girlfriend or boyfriend said to you when they broke up with you. That can be traumatic, because trauma isn't what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you. You know, as one of my trauma teachers said, Gabor Mate, and it's something that changes you psychologically and physiologically and causes you to change a behavior, causes you to adapt in order to survive. And it's this trauma adaptation that then gets us to behave in certain kinds of way in order to avoid that original pain. So actually, if I behave like this, I can avoid that. I can dodge that. I don't have to deal with that. But what we have is, when we avoid that thing, if we adapt in order to create that connection or to get our needs met in some kind of way, what we actually do is we suppress that thing, we avoid it, we detach from that thing. And as we depress it into our system, which is what actually happens when the system is depressed, is we push those things down from the experience, and it causes those things to kind of leak out of the sides. Kind of, it comes out at the seams and then starts to color the way that we show up in the world or our lives around us. And yet we don't understand why it's happening, because we're doing our best to avoid that thing, but that thing keeps showing up in our existence. So it's really important to understand, when we're looking at the trauma side of things, you know, they talk about what you resist persists. That's always the cliche meme you see when you're kind of looking at people, you know, doing their spiritual bypassing. But the way that I extend this is, you know, it's the resistance that causes the persistence that makes it show up in your existence.
Okay.
So when you kind of understand that actually it's causing this thing, which is then causing it to repeat constantly in your world, in your system, physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, it will keep generating. The more that we push it down, the more it just comes out to find us. No, but this is a really new understanding for me. And by the way, I know we talked about this before, Ray. If you've got questions or anyone else has got questions, please jump in, ask them, because it will just help the conversation evolve even further. So how did I get to this point of understanding? I didn't know what trauma was. I had no idea what trauma was as a child. I grew up in the 80s, the 70s and 80s. You know, when we had recessions back then, when mortgages were almost 20%, and, you know, you genuinely didn't eat if you couldn't eat, that sort of experience.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, they were heavy times, but, you know, we just didn't understand what was going on consciously, politically, emotionally, any of those things. And we grew up in a fairly normal kind of environment. We didn't know what war was unless it was on the 6 o'clock news, and it was somewhere in some far-flung country in some far-flung corner of the world. That stuff didn't really touch us. And as I grew up, I had this normal childhood, and then one day I had severe abdominal pains, and I was rushed into hospital, and it turned out I had a perforated appendix. I've got a fairly high pain threshold, and I think I always have had, which is why
I've got a high pain threshold as well, which is really, which sounds good, but it's
not. It's useful at times, but there's other times it's like it covers stuff up really well. It's just like, yeah, I'll get over that. It's like, you know, it's like that other cliche meme. It's like, you know, when I was a kid, you know, if you broke a leg, your mum would just tell you to walk it off. I was one of those, you know. It was so. I had these kind of abdominal pains. I get taken to hospital for a routine procedure, routine operation, come out of hospital, and I'm still having abdominal pains. I go to hospital and they say, oh, you've got trapped gas because of the operation, you've got this. But the pain didn't stop. And the pain continued on, you know, 2-3 months it's continued on backwards and forwards to the hospital. And then one day I walked into the doctors, and it was not our normal doctor, it was a locum doctor who we knew. And he took one look at me and said, you've got Crohn's disease, you need to go to hospital and get 2 pints of blood put in you.
Wow.
So this was 1988, it was about 1988 this happened, maybe 87, 88. And at that point, it was only prepubescent girls who got Crohn's disease. So according to their laws of probability and their kind of their probability scales, it was basically hormonal adolescent girls were most likely to get Crohn's, which is why I wasn't getting diagnosed at that time. But even then, when you look at situations now and you look at how fast people are or are not diagnosed with Crohn's, 2 to 3 months was actually pretty well, you know, was a pretty radical turnaround, especially in the late 80s. So there's me as an 8-9-year-old boy diagnosed with Crohn's, which was a bit of a confusion to them. I then spent a year in hospital, or a further 7 to 8 months in hospital, going backwards and forwards. abdominal restructure, abscesses, kidney deflated, pipes in all sorts of places, including my jugular vein. Stuff you wouldn't want to imagine for a 9-year-old.
No.
But then my mum was more powerful than Google, because Google didn't exist in the 80s, so she was on it. Yeah, and she went to the health food shop and she was speaking to different people, and we found an alternative therapist, and we changed my diet and treated it as candida. So it was internal yeast infection, candida albicans, rather than Crohn's. And that was when I was 9, and I have not had a flare-up since, and I'm 44.
Wow.
And I can eat whatever I want to a limit. And I know what my limits are, and I know what certain things will trigger certain internal, bacterial overgrowths. But I've never had a flare-up. I've never had any reoccurrence. I do not take medication. I do not manage it with medication. I have not got Crohn's. There's another part to that story, but we'll get into that in a minute. So that happened when I was 9. So this was really my first experiences of trauma. But actually what that was trying to do was it was trying to teach me compassion, because of those wonderful nurses in the NHS that were supporting me. But I really wasn't listening. I was still determined. I was still pushing. I was still working really hard to because that's the mindset I've got, kind of challenging myself. And then I went into secondary school, and then I was severely bullied around about the age of 13. So there was a group of lads from another school. I'm 6'6", so I'm a big guy, tall. And I think what they saw me as the same age as them. They were 2 years older than them, and they started to see me as sport. So every day it was, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and it was terrorizing for months. And what I would do is, rather than walking the normal route home, I would walk the long route home, and I would run the last 20 minutes so that I would be at home at the same time. So that my parents wouldn't ever ask me any questions.
Oh, wow.
So I just stomached it and literally did that the whole way through. I couldn't tell my brother, because my brother was the toughest kid in school. I couldn't tell my dad because he was a policeman. And I felt like I would be less of a man. So I just held on to this stuff. But I didn't know what to do with it. And as Sandra Wilson, Dr. Sandra Wilson says, hurt people hurt people. So I didn't deal with this. I didn't speak to anyone else. So what do you do as a young teenager? How do you process that pain? Well, I just started bullying other people. Because if I can bully them and I can be crazier than them, and then I can be more angry than them, then they'll stop hurting me, because I'm hurting other people. So that's what I did. But I didn't understand that logic. I didn't understand that survival mechanism, that adaptation. In order to stop this pain, I had to go and cause pain according to my own subconscious.
Yeah.
But
did it actually stop the bullies bullying you?
Yeah. Massively so, because they started to see that I started to get a real kind of reputation for who I was and how I was behaving. And people left me alone, which is all I really wanted. But in truth, part of my schooling is I never felt like I actually fitted in anyway. I've never fitted in. I was always a bit of an oddball, a bit of a black sheep, was always on the periphery of every social group, but never really part of any social group. Well, that's what it felt like. So there was always this kind of difference, this weirdo-ness, I can't remember the name of the guy that actually wrote the quote, but he's got an I see genius. And this was actually kind of that black sheepness already coming through, but other people didn't know it or didn't know how to foster it or nurture it. So I just struggled with it for a lot of the time. And that anger and that self-loathing turned into misuse of recreational drugs. It turned into cannabis, which then turned into ecstasy, combining with LSD and mushrooms, again, different parts of the kind of the process with those two. But then into cocaine. And I went traveling. I had an amazing time traveling. But then when I came back, I came straight back into that melting pot, that troubled environment, and fell back into those old routines and those old patterns and those old frustrations. And then 8 months into pretty much an 8-month drug binge, I then overdosed on recreational drugs, and took 16 ecstasy tablets in one night and sniffed in excess of 5 grams of cocaine, probably more than that, but I couldn't tell you if it happened or not after that first lot. But purely because of my physical tolerance and what had been building up over that time was the only reason that I actually came out the other side of it. But it broke me physically, mentally, spiritually, all of the above. But then it sent my life in a very different trajectory. So I separated a lot of the relationships I had with so-called friends at that time. I changed a lot of relationship dynamics. I stopped doing drugs literally like that. Everything just stopped and changed. Because I had this understanding in my head that this is not what I'm here for. I didn't come here to show up to do this. I'm either going to be dead or in prison if I carry on doing this. And I had a, reasonably good business offer on the table to actually start a business at the same time involving cocaine. So it was at that crossroads point where I will either be dead or in prison, or I can go and actually do what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And okay, it's been a bit of time on this curve, but this curve's been a hell of a lot healthier than option A was at the time.
Yeah, just teensy wince a little bit.
Just a bit. So this was kind of like, the kind of the next stage of my trauma understanding. But through this process, I've already started learning psychotherapy techniques, coaching techniques. I'm already massively into people. I would sit there, and on occasion I would sit in the middle of my hometown with a packet of cigarettes, and I would just watch people all day long and just smoke a packet. So just watching the world go by, looking at human behavior, human dynamics, understanding the power of language. I was quite manipulative at times when I was a teenager, but it's just understanding these language patterns and how we get things out of people. It's kind of testing the boundaries. But then kind of seeing that hurt and heartache that I was experiencing, that I was inflicting on other people and that was inflicted on me, and kind of how these things were playing off each other and causing one thing to kind of cascade into the other. It really got me to explore it. I went to Amsterdam. Had some great times in Amsterdam, training martial arts, which then caused me to travel to Brazil as I was then started teaching martial arts and trained with some of the greatest fighters in Rio. It was amazing times. Then came back to the UK. And then got into banking as part of my work. I then was a bank manager of all things. And then I worked in car insurance for, 9 years, 10 years or something. Again, just things that do not fit with who I am, but they are things that I felt I had to do in order to fit in. Here's a job, you work these amount of hours in these many years, and you maybe get a set of golf clubs at the end of it if you're lucky, or whatever it is we do when you retire. And this is, you get paid a weekly salary, and it's just like, this is how the world works, and this is how you work in the world. And again, just didn't fit in. No, it's like, again, it taught me so many good things about leadership. I learned some of the most valuable lessons about leadership from some of the most horrendous leaders out there.
Yeah.
That were bound up in deep neuroses, like deep problematic neuroses that were going on. People that were disciplined for sexual harassment in the workplace and all sorts of crazy things, again, that you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of. And what I was observing is like, do I actually want to make somebody else feel like that? No. Okay, how do I do that differently? Okay, well, I share these skills, I do this. And all these things that I've been learning through coaching techniques, learning the Grow coaching model, learning psychotherapy techniques, communication skills, I then started to shift and share. And in that, then I started to explore how I develop leaders, how I support people developing up, how I help them evolve. But the challenge was I was working in environments where, when it came to leadership psychology and leadership development and how to get the best out of people, I actually knew more than my boss's boss. So I can then hitting these frustrations where it's like, well, actually, I know this. Why don't you know it? Thinking, well, if I know this, you must know this. Well, what's wrong with you? But it was again coming from this place of frustration and irritation. It's just like, why don't you know what I'm doing? Why don't you just let me? Why aren't you listening to me? But I was expressing it from this place of kind of not self-deprecation, but depreciation of the other.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're an idiot. Like, why aren't you listening to me? Well, probably because you think they're an idiot is why they're not listening to you. But I didn't understand this at the time. So again, I was going through this communication breakdown where I was meeting very similar characters to me, and I couldn't communicate to them because I hadn't learned how to communicate or wasn't actually implementing what I had learned about it, which was just causing this dissonance between these relationships. But again, it was just reminding me I was in the wrong place to actually be somewhere else. So there's this constant kind of push-pull dynamic, and it's just like, okay, what's going on here? And then as we kind of explored it, it was like, okay, I started to see more problems in other areas, like the lack of skills in the L&D, and I want to share more of what I know. And it's like, right, okay, actually that inspired me. The thing that I could see that was missing was actually inspiring me to get on board with the thing that I was bringing. That thing that you lack is the thing that you need to give, and really tuning into that. And as I was doing that, then I went and qualified as the leadership coach. Then I was using the psychotherapy techniques that I'd learned. and then sharing them and teaching them to leaders because they're super powerful in relationship dynamics. Helping people get the best results on their sales calls, teaching people how to actually deliver on sales calls on a daily basis, and get ridiculously phenomenal results, and just helping people push that. But I was still struggling with this. Why don't people know this stuff? Why aren't people talking about this? I'm getting angrier and angrier and angrier. I was like, right, okay, I can't be here. This is all off. And I went and worked for a training company, and then became a training consultant and contractor, and I was working with some other large organizations, including AG Bar, the people that make Iron Brew, Hilton Foods, which are the people that supply red meats and meat for people like Tesco's, etc. So huge organizations, teaching this content to their front line and middle management, helping them to understand how their brain works, how to get results out of people, how if you treat people this way, these are the things that are going to happen, and sharing my experiences of frustration, agitation, successes, realizations, and all those things, and packaging this up and giving it to other people. But then kind of the final part of this is really understanding, like, well, although the content was good and many people got great results out of it, there was still this portion of people that would get the content, get the idea, have an amazing training experience, and then go back out onto the shop floor and do exactly the same thing as they did before.
Oh, no.
And you would be left wondering, well, why? And you could see them enjoying the training process, and they were really involved with it, and they're sharing these concepts with each other, with their peers, and you're like, fantastic, this is great. And then all of a sudden, you speak to them a week later, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't work. It's like, I know it works. A, because it's working for your good friend over there, and they're delivering, and they're inspired, and but why is it not working for you? Why isn't this stuff kind of sinking in for my previous bosses? Why are they where they are? Why are they actually causing so much damage to their people, in their teams, in their business, their bottom lines? What's going on with this? And the more work that I'd been doing, the more I realized that actually stuff was coming up for people, whether it was body image, self-esteem, confidence, self-sabotage, ability to get promoted, ability to get results or deliver on their sales stuff. I've been kind of processing it through these psychotherapy lenses and really understanding that actually there's something that sits underneath all of that. There's something that sits under every single behavior, every single attribute, every single roadblock that we put up in our place. And, with the psychotherapy lenses, ego states, and the open questions, we can explore those things. But what I didn't have was a safe container to take people to those places. And what those places are is actually going to the inner child and the trauma space. Because every single behavior that we have in the majority is an adaptation that caused us to behave in a certain kind of way so that we don't experience a pain, we don't experience a hurt. We moves us towards survival. It moves us away from the thing it thinks is going to kill us, eat us, steal our food, steal our mate, do all of those things. So it gives you a behavior here, it gives you a choice of direction to keep you safe. So when we start to understand that, and when we look at self-sabotage, and it's not a case of do you self-sabotage, it's a case of to what level do you self-sabotage. Yeah. Now I say this to people when I'm doing my trainings, etc. I said, who here's a procrastinator? And most people will go like this, and you'll always get one or two, no, I'm not a procrastinator. But it's not a case of whether you are a procrastinator, it's to what level. We have been procrastinating for hundreds of thousands of years. If you lived in a cave 200,000 years ago, there you are in your cave with your mate and your children and your food supplies for the winter or whatever, and it's nice and cozy, and it's just like, well, the kids are hungry. Right. Shit. Out there, right, are saber-toothed tigers, there are 14-foot high kangaroos, and there are wombats the size of like mini metros. Straight up, I've seen them, by the way. In the Sydney Natural History Museum, they're massive. A 14-foot high kangaroo is terrifying.
Wow.
Yeah, the abs on that thing are bad, boy, and would make Arnold Schwarzenegger cry. Yeah. So, like, you've got a choice. You can either stay in your cave, nice and cozy and safe, or you can go out. Sounds like Nottingham. Yeah. It's been a while since I've been clubbing in Nottingham, Keith. Right, so, but you've got a choice. Either you can stay nice and cozy in your cave, or you can go out. Well, do I really need to do that? Have I got enough supplies? Oh, I don't know. Like, we've got a choice here. Oh, let's have a think about it. Let's second guess that. Let's doubt that a little bit, just because that's a healthy thing to do. But the problem is now that when we get to 2022, the brain, how it's evolved, doesn't know the difference between a job interview and a saber-toothed tiger. It just rates them exactly the same level. Exactly the same level of stress. What about breaking up from this relationship? What about changing job? What about going self-employed? What about whatever it is that you haven't done before? It rates them at the same level of stress. It's like, well, do you really need to do that? Look, you know what you're in, you know what you're getting into here. Everything's comfortable. Stay comfortable. Because why? The brain and the human body is seeking comfort. But the problem you have is your soul and your higher self is seeking expansion. So you have, again, you've got this push-pull dynamic of crap. Physically, I want safety, I want security, I want certainty, which, by the way, don't exist at all. There is no such thing as security or certainty in nature. But the human soul is just screaming out for evolution. And this is what the comfort zones are. But what happens is your comfort zones will shrink or expand in in direct accordance and relationship to where you stand in relationship to it. So if you go into a state of inertia and squeeze yourself down and make yourself small, your comfort zone will shrink wrap you and hold you.
Okay.
But the moment you start to kind of have a little wiggle and dig your elbows out a bit and push it and go, hold on a minute, I need to explore the world. This isn't cool. No, actually, I'm done. This situation, this relationship, this environment, this isn't right. This isn't okay anymore. Then we can step out of it just a little bit, or we can just do a little bit of a toe dip and explore it. And then that comfort zone starts to wriggle a little bit and it starts to shift. And that, that's how we then start to shake it. I can see Keith's putting there, dream big. If not scary enough, it's not enough. Exactly. One of my teachers said, when you set a goal, if you know how to set it, if you know how to achieve it when you set it, it's not big enough. So it's understanding that, yeah, but at the same time, when we are creating the expansion, we have to nurture the contraction. This means that, it's that same with that song. I think it's Karen Drucker. Can only go as fast as the slowest part of me. So as we're expanding our business, as we're changing our relationships, as we're doing something new or whatever, as we're creating that expansion and we're stepping outside of our comfort zone, actually there's going to be a sense of contraction, which is going to remind us about the small part of us that's inside of there, that experienced that sensation that we had before. So when we go out and we're stepping into that space and whatever it is we're doing, we're maybe changing relationship with a partner or stepping into a new job, and then you get this kind of niggle. It's like, oh, there's self-doubt. There's that fear of not enough, or that fear of losing love, or whatever it is. And we're stepping into it. It's like, there's a stuckness.
Yeah.
And then we'll do everything that we can. We're like, oh, I'm not going to apply for that job because Bob's applied for it as well, and I've known Bob for 15 years, and I really don't want to piss Bob off. He's a really nice guy, so I won't apply for it. But what if you do apply for it and you get the job? Yeah, but maybe the people in the team will think less of me because now they'll think I'm above my station and I'm all full of myself. But what if you don't get the job? Oh, what if then my wife will think less of me? My wife will think I'm an idiot because I didn't get the job. So we're making up 57 different excuses not to do these things.
Yeah.
And as we do that, it's like, hold on a minute, is that the truth? When did you first feel like that? What's your earliest memory of feeling like that inside of you? And we can explore that feeling, because that feeling becomes then a doorway, a portal. So and I know many practices do this, closing your eyes and, okay, what's that thing that's coming up for you? I can feel that fear, it's an anger, it's an upset, and that emotion becomes a doorway, and we can go into it and we can find it in the body and feel where it is in the body. Physically, how does it feel to you? And what sensations does it come with? What emotions are behind that? What does it look like? And then we can start to have a conversation with that protective part of your subconscious mind. And then we can ask it, how old were you when you first showed up in my life? And then from there, as we explore that, then we can speak to that. Okay, how old were you when you first experienced that? And then speaking to those younger parts of us and then helping those parts to come in and heal, so that instead of us kind of tripping ourselves up and self-sabotaging, which is actually that protective part of our ego. I'll explain more about this in a minute. Protecting that little part of us, because it doesn't want you to feel like you did in that original moment when it first showed up in your life. Because it thinks if you feel like that, you will die. And if it die, if your ego dies, you die. Therefore, it's going to do everything it can in order to stop you from going to that place. So don't apply for that job. Don't step outside of the cave. Don't go outside of your comfort zone. We don't know what's out there. We can't manage that. We can't look after you. So just don't do it. And here's every possible mechanism to support you in not doing that and staying exactly where you are.
Yeah, makes so much sense. When you put it there, and obviously we've got a lot of stuff coming in. And Keith says people think, what others think doesn't matter at all. Just being self, and learning to be happy with all you are.
100%. I want to say one thing to that. How my wife kind of made it. What people think of you is none of your effing business.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
And we get so wrapped up in thinking, what are they thinking about us, that we end up taking no action. And I joke with people, do you want to know what people think of you? Let me tell you what people actually think of you. All of you. This would be for everyone here. So whether it's Keith, Donna, Laura, all of you, I'm going to tell you what people think of you. Nothing, because they're too busy thinking, what are you thinking about them?
Yep.
This is the cosmic joke of it. So it's really important, is kind of understanding that that's what it is. It's like we then apply meaning and significance to things. We apply labels to it to kind of to tally up with our protective ego, to validate where we are and how we're protecting ourselves. So we apply meaning and significance to certain things, even if it's made up or not true. It doesn't matter. Just to keep ourselves safe, not realizing actually it's got nothing to do with us. It's got everything to do with them. It's what they're projecting onto us, which is then feeding into our story, which we learned as a young age. And they end up becoming characters in our story, which encourages us to react, which actually means to react a past moment in the present, which is stopping us from creating the future. So we just end up playing a character in their story. They play a character in our story, and we end up just kind of,
evolving, man, this same story,
perpetuating the same cycle. So when we understand that, it's just like, okay, what character are you asking me to play? Am I really that character? No. Are you really the character in my story? Or are you actually just being my dad? Are you being my mum when you hurt me that time when I was 7? This is why often, the best we can hope for is with relationships with partners, that we end up marrying the wrong person for the wrong reasons. That's the best most of us can hope for in a relationship. But what we end up doing is actually evolving, or that person evolves, my wife evolves, which inspires me to go, shit, I need to keep up here. And I evolve, which then inspires her to, and then we spend the rest of our life doing this. But I know very, very few conscious people that have got together consciously in their first relationship. So it's about exploring this.
So Laura actually has put a question there. So she's got a question. What's the best piece of advice that you could give someone that's had trauma, damage from childhood and adult relationships, which leads to no trust? How do you move on from that and learn to regain trust in others and know that not everyone is the same? So asking in general. Yeah, and it's a good question, Laura, because a lot of people will resonate with that one.
Yeah. And so it's understanding a couple of these elements. And I'm going to go backwards through this to give you this. The first thing is understanding that love and happiness have got. Am I okay to swear on this show, right? Like,
oh God, yeah, it's my show. Well, it's your show. Well, it's your show. So if you want to swear, swear.
Crack on. Okay, cool. Thanks. I'm quite a sweary individual, but there are rules to this. I don't swear at people. I'm still practicing that one, especially when they cut me up in traffic. There's no isms. There's no isms. There's no racism. There's no sexism. There's no grey areas in it. It's just not okay. Clear. And I try not to use human anatomy, because I think actually we're human beings and we're kind of sacred, and using anatomy as kind of as abusive is just wrong in itself in kind of so many different ways. is understanding that love and happiness have got fuck all to do with each other. I know plenty of people that are in love that aren't happy, and I know plenty of people that are happy and aren't in love. So it's really kind of understanding these two things don't kind of match up. Now, the important thing to understand what love actually is, in my opinion, love is the trust that you put into someone to hold the mirror so that you can see all your own shit reflected back in it. That's it. Most of us, though, get stuck in the point of pointing our finger at the person and blaming them for making us feel bad, or blaming them for a situation and all of those things, rather than taking the opportunity to look in the mirror. Now, maybe the mirror's kind of muddied over or smeared or a bit cracked or whatever, and we don't want to look in the mirror, but it's just easier to point our finger at the person holding it. But when we understand that, I think Neil Donald Walsh says, "I send you nothing but angels." I think it was him that said that. And actually, what's this person bringing up for me? What are they showing me? What are they triggering me? What part of their story, of my story, are they carrying for me? Am I projecting them onto them? Was it Shakespeare said that all the world's a stage and all the people players? I paraphrase. I know I paraphrase, but notice that. But this is what these characters are. They're playing characters in your story. So we're holding these wounds and we're showing up in different ways with different understandings or different kind of aspects of how the world is. And a phrase that I learned a few years ago is, what you think of people is how you treat them. So if I think you're an idiot, how am I going to treat you?
Like an idiot.
Like an idiot. But because my brain is a natural validation machine, what I'm now doing is creating a list of tick boxes to tick. So I'm now looking for reasons why you're an idiot. But what happens is, because I think you're an idiot, my body language changes, my choice of words change, the way that I shape my words change. So actually what I'm doing is I'm just triggering in you something which is going to encourage you to tick a box, and you will behave like an idiot. Either you'll get really angry with me for me being so derogatory to you, and I just go, well, obviously you're an idiot. You just got really angry with me. What's wrong with you, tick? Yeah, or you'll go and do something stupid because you'll be so flustered at the pressure I'm putting on you and trying to not perform that way and trying to exceed performance, that you'll end up tripping over and falling on your face. And I go, well, obviously you're an idiot, tick. You can't win.
Yeah.
So that when we turn up into relationships, I'm creating a shadow on that relationship, and I am projecting my thought, my biases onto it, and I'm now just seeking boxes to tick, and I'm looking for those boxes to tick just to kind of go, yeah, I was right, I told you so. I'm safe because I can see what's happening in the world. But actually, you're creating the world based on the survival mechanisms in your head. This is what confirmation biases do for us. They hold us in a pattern, they hold us in a groove. And we can't change the record because that's the track and the song that we know that keeps us safe. So when we start to understand this, that actually that trust is what's going on in the world, who can hold this mirror up for me, how can I see myself, how can I explore this, we can start to look at it in a different way. I'm going to read Laura's message in here first before I continue with this next part of the analogy, because I think you have to be true to who you truly are. Everyone's yourself, the love, the pain, the heart, it all builds up in you to be a better person. I'm thankful for my past, and it's made me who I am today, and it's gifted me my 4 beautiful children. 100%. But you know, even in you writing this law, in that many people cannot get to that point, and they don't realize that. No, because certain things that happen to us are so horrendous and so heartbreaking and so rending that it's very difficult to see the gifts and the gratitudes that come out of these things. You know, there are a plethora of triggering events that I could share here.
Yeah,
and there are, you know, and you know, children are the result of those things, but very rarely are they seen as gifts. No. They end up wearing that stigma of that situation. Yeah. So yeah, our lives are unfolding and enabling us to do these phenomenal things. The same with the traumas that I've experienced from Crohn's disease, from bullying, from drug abuse, from whatever, all of those things. And actually they have educated me and taught me through experience how to succeed. You know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. More often than not, what doesn't kill you makes you tired, grouchy, dependent, perfectionist. It teaches you a hell of a lot of kind of survival mechanisms. And sometimes, you know, you just need to understand how those survival mechanisms are keeping you safe, but they're actually stopping you from expanding. So let me explain this. Surely anxiety helps when the mind with the mindset of security to use more of the brain to see all avenues, which in turn shows the depth that they are always secure with the complexity of any situation. So let me break some of this down, because that's part of what Laura's saying and part of what Keith is expressing in here, and also what Donna is expressing here, leads into this analogy that I use with everybody that I work with. So whether it's in the free training or whether people are coming to work with me one-to-one, I imagine there's you, little Ray or little Keith or little Laura, whatever. And this might be a little bit triggering for people to go into this. Whoever's listening to this live or on the replay, imagine there's little you. And you're 3 or 4 years old. And you're inside the boardroom of your own head. Like you're inside the C-suite of your inner world. And there you are, all dressed up in adult clothes with the sleeves hanging down, looking like one of those cute wedding card pictures. Yeah. And there's mum and dad. And then the divine feminine, the divine masculine. And they're gods. And they have to be. Because human babies are the most fucking useless creature on the planet. Scientifically proven, by the way. I'm not even saying that for giggles. It's scientifically proven.
No, it is.
Yeah. So if you look at a dog or you look at a gazelle or a giraffe, within two hours they can walk. Within 2 days they can run. Human baby can't even clean its own ass for the first 4 years of your life if you're lucky. Yeah. So there's mum and dad, divine feminine, divine masculine. They're gods, and they got to be. Because why? Because human babies only need 3 things. I say human babies. Yeah, actually, human babies only need these 3 things. They need to feel safe, certain, and loved. That's it. Safe with these people, certain they're going to get their needs met, and loved for who they are. But there you are, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, even inside the womb. I saw Keith's message earlier about that. Even inside of the womb, you suddenly get given this dossier of how fucked your mum is because they said something or they did something, or your dad wasn't there, or he let you down, or whatever it was. And you get given this dossier and your whole world starts to collapse. You no longer feel safe. You no longer feel certain. You no longer feel loved. And if you open this, your world is going to collapse. That's it. You can die from this. And it's actually, again, scientifically proven. They did studies on the children from the Romanian orphanages in the 80s. You know, these kids that were handcuffed to beds, etc. It was horrendous. And the levels of autism, like high-end, non-functioning autism that came out of those places, was off the chart. It was horrendous. So as a result of not feeling safe, certain, or loved, your world collapses down on you. Your psyche thinks that you're going to die. Now, the human brain only wants you to do 2 things. Stay alive, make babies. That's it. That's how the human species continues. That's how we've survived for hundreds of thousands of years. It's very kind of primordial, very, very basic. Is this going to help me move forward? Is this going to stop me? Very simple binary equations. So your brain wants you to do this, but if you don't feel safe, you don't feel certain, you don't feel loved, you can't do those things. You can't stay alive. You can't make babies because you don't have that certainty. So this is when the ego then starts to form, and then the ego steps in. The ego says, I'll take that away from you. And little Ray, little Keith, little whoever's out there is like, seriously, I'm good, bro. Take it away. This is fucking horrendous. I don't want to feel like this. And he goes like, great, fantastic. And it reaches in and it takes this dossier away, and I'm going to lock it in this room, and I'm going to mark this room a 99 out of 100 for shitstorm. Okay. If you go in here, it's going to be apocalyptic. It's going to be 4 horsemen, rivers of blood, cats liking dogs. It's going to be a fucking mess. And little you, like little 4-year-old you's like, I'm seriously good. Take it away. He goes like, cool. It takes away some of the memories, which is why often we don't remember parts of our childhood. It takes away some of the emotions, takes the hurt with it. Excuse me. It gives you some kind of capacity to function in that moment, to cope. And it locks it in this room. And it says, right, but in order for you to stay away from this room, you're going to have to change the way you behave. And the little you's like, well, I don't want to feel like that. What do you want me to do? He goes like, well, great. Well, the first thing you're going to have to do is say it's all your fault. And the little you goes, I can do that. Because if you don't say it's all your fault and it's their fault, you won't feel safe and certain. And in order to stay alive and make babies, you just have to be safe and certain. You don't need love to make babies. You just have to have certainties and securities. So we say it's all our fault, but what we're actually saying, we don't realize because we're so small, that actually we're not lovable, because if we were lovable, they wouldn't have done that to us. And we now have a void, we now have a gap inside of us, and we don't even realize what's going on. Why? Because we're 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 21. I mean, what did I even know at 24? I thought I knew everything at 24. I knew nothing. My brain wasn't even fully developed at that point. So we're holding on to this awareness or this feeling that we're not lovable. And now what we're doing is the ego then encourages us to go out into the world in order to bridge that gap, to fill that void inside of us. Because we feel like there's a chasm inside of us of where we're not lovable, we are incomplete, we are broken. And we're led to believe that in that moment. And that moment may be, for some people, it's actually a parent dying. Because we're so young, we don't understand or comprehend why that happened. For some people, it might be maybe your mum's got severe PMS. And you go home with one of those, those cheap little Mother's Day cards you used to make with the egg carton and the yellow crepe paper and the cheap stick-on calendar. Like, Mummy, look at it. I've made you this beautiful calendar for Mother's Day, and your mum's freaking out because the bills are coming and Dad's done something or upset or whatever, or the dog's just died, and she goes, "That's nice," dear, throws it on the side, and all of a sudden that's trauma, and it's ingrained, it's built in. And all of a sudden we're left wanting, and we don't know why, but that's already encoded in our system that we're not good enough for some reason, something that we poured our heart and soul into and given to our primary caregiver, and it's just been rejected, and we're like, fuck, what's wrong with me? Actually, there's nothing wrong with you. But we don't know that because we're small, because we didn't get that connection reestablished. So then what we do is we go back out into the world demanding that connection. Everything we're doing is a bid for connection. But we're doing it from a place of feeling less than, of empty, broken, not feeling whole and complete, looking for our better half, looking for someone to complete us. And this is what happens. We end up going into the world looking for validation. So we end up looking for doing people-pleasing, codependency, extreme independency, overworking, overqualifying. So we end up getting another qualification just to see how good we are in the world. And we get another qualification, another one. Yeah. But then we get into alcohol and smoking and sex and Netflix and social media and online gaming, and we're doing all these things, and porn and whatever else. And we're using these addictions just to quieten the noise, using the other things to self-validate, procrastination, distraction, but it's all just out there in the distraction, keeping us away from the thing that actually we need to feel. Because it still thinks that you're the same age as you were when that original event happened. Your protective ego still thinks you're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And when I talk about inner child, by the way, inner child for me is any version of you that's younger than today. I've worked with people doing inner child work from 8 weeks before the date we were working together because they were hit in a road traffic accident. And we've explored those things. That's for me is inner child work. But that protective part of your ego still thinks you're that age. So what it's doing is it's protecting the 4-year-old in the way that it worked with the 4-year-old at that time. So what happens is it's encouraging you to behave in a certain kind of way, to interact in a certain kind of way, which is actually meaning that you're walking backwards in a circle with your eyes closed, but you're always left wondering, why do I end up in the same place? I end up in the same relationship with a different person. And then what your ego says is, whoa, I told you so. Got yourself in another one of those situations. When actually it was your protective ego that probably encouraged you to get into that situation in the first place, just so it could say, I told you so, in order to validate its position in your fucking life anyway. Your protective ego is so powerful, so amazing. Like, how much energy is your protective ego put into keeping you safe? How much energy is your protective ego put into keeping you held in a certain pattern for a certain number of years? How powerful is that? How much energy is in that? How many calories have you expended? Just even thinking about that, how incredible that part of you is. But then what we then start to understand is, why is that part of my mind doing that? Because it fucking loves you. It loves you so much. It doesn't want you to feel like you did in that original moment. But there's a twisted part of it which doesn't understand the standard operating procedure, the onboarding process that keeps you perpetuating it so it can validate itself. But that's because you understand how you get safety and certainty met is by interacting with this kind of person that behaves in this kind of way. And when you say this kind of thing, you feel completely safe, creates complete certainty. And that's how you understand how love works. But we don't realize we're doing it because we're still acting like a 3-year-old. And then as we start to understand, it's like, we know we get into this situation, we end up in a relationship with someone again, and it's just the same thing over again, and it's just this whatever, and we don't even realize why we're doing it, and we're giving ourselves a hard time and beating ourselves up. And actually that beating ourselves up is actually encouraging the protective part of the ego to work even harder, because it's now saying, well, obviously you're not ready to deal with this. We need to carry on driving the car. We're not giving you the fucking keys. And that's how that's how we actually support ourselves staying in it. So one of the key things to do is the moment you hear that voice, giving yourself a hard time, or, giving yourself a kicking, is just like taking a breath and going, fuck, actually, do you know what? You are doing the best that you can with the best that you've got. Take your foot off the perfection gas. What else could you do differently that's actually going to help right now? Sometimes even just catching that is enough to kind of just go in a different direction. Even 1 degree shift, a 1% shift, or whatever it is, that just takes the pressure of yourself, quietens the noise down just a little bit. Rather than, most alcoholics consider alcohol the devil and they call themselves a bad person. Well, why can't I get my shit together? And alcohol's awful, it keeps me stuck in this. Well, actually, what if alcohol's the one thing that's keeping you sane? Marianne Faithfull said heroin saved my life. Because it's the only thing that kept her sane with all the chaos that was going on in her life. We do these things to help us, to self-anesthetize, to self-medicate, to get us through, to give some sort of semblance of order. When everything feels so disordered, especially when we get all these prognoses, general anxiety disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not disordered, it's completely ordered. It's completely normal based on the experiences you've had as a child. It's a survival mechanism. It's a coping strategy. It's a trauma reaction. So when we take the pressure off those parts of us for behaving like these in these survivalistic ways, actually we can bring those parts closer, and we can start to have a conversation with them and hold ourselves and nurture ourselves, which then enables the child to come forward. That actually is just looking to trust you, to feel safe with you, rather than you looking, trying to be seen by people that can't see themselves. You actually see yourself. You actually take the time to hold yourself. You are the hand that you wish to hold. You are the lap that you wish to sit on. You are the hug that you wish to be enfolded into. And you stop looking for it from anybody else. And you start giving it to yourself. That which you seek is already within you. I think Buddha said that. I'm not taking the credit for that one. But this is
higher people have taken that one.
Yeah. But this is the important thing: is the way out is we go in and we use those pain points, we use those habits, we use those behaviors, we use the emotions as the entrance point to go into that exploration. What is this situation?
Okay, I think Nathan's frozen on us there. Must be his Wi-Fi. So, you back?
Oh,
there you go.
Coming back.
No, he's gone. That's fine. He'll come back in a minute. Did say that if he came out here to come back in again. So whilst waiting for Nathan to come back, thank you so much for the questions and sharing. And Laura, thank you very much for asking that question. And you said you have to be true to who you truly are. Every once of yourself, the pain, heartache builds this person. And what was the one to go? So yeah, she said, there we go. Nathan is on his way back in. We hope. We just wait for him to come back. He's there trying to get in, but he's not quite in just yet. So whilst he's got his camera ready, so Laurie said, hi, let's get Nathan back in. There we go. So we'll bring Nathan back in. So Laura was sort of like saying, my marriage was domestic violence, but I'm now healed and thankful experience this spiritual path as there's more to life than just this physical body.
Yep.
And Keith again, sort of like said, I found a need for speaking to people was quite hard to break. It took me 3 months of solitude, and now it's like I'm good with not speaking to anyone for days or months. So in a way, it is an addiction.
Yeah. So it's finding the right balance in these things. Are we talking to people for the sake of talking to them? Because misery doesn't love company. Misery loves miserable company. Now, are we doing it just to perpetuate and self-validate ourselves in those, just to kind of use someone as a sounding board and someone to go, oh, there. No, it's, and just kind of validating why you're in that experience. Or actually, are we talking to people because it's going to help us and help us to understand and evolve and move? And actually, there's also that in solitude. But again, it's understanding, what space am I going into and why? Because when we look at it, you've got two ends of this continuum. You've got codependency on one end and you've got independency on the other end. And actually, from a trauma reaction, we can just swing from one to the other. And depending on what person we're with or what sort of person is in our environment or where we are psychologically, we may pull someone in and become extremely codependent and then push them away just to create more independence. Just again, looking at this protective behaviors of our protective ego from this trauma reaction. And again, is what Laura was saying about the marriage and domestic violence. It is a healing process. And Laura knows this better than many. There are times when that, for some reason, just comes back up to the surface for no apparent reason. It's asking us to explore it in a different way. It comes to the surface, someone says something in a certain kind of way, or a person stands in a certain kind of way. And just in that moment, there's a flicker. We don't know why, but it's that thing that's held viscerally inside us, that survival instinct that we've learned. So that when we go into that healing process, yes, we'll do a layer of healing. And that enables us to spiral and move upwards. But then as we spiral and move upwards, we get a completely change of vista, of panoramic, of understanding of the world. And we get to look at that experience from a different angle, which we could have never looked at it if we hadn't already taken those first steps. And someone says something or does something, and then we end up looking at it from a new perspective, looking up, oh, there's another part of that needs me to go in there and explore that. I need to shake the snow globe again a little bit. I use this analogy with people. It's like people working with me sometimes, it's like shaking the snow globes. There you are with that beautiful, princess scene inside the snow globe, whatever it is, and then we come along and we shake it and the snow goes everywhere. And it's like really disorientated, like, fuck, I can't see anything. What's going on? Like, what craziness. Bah! But then as the snow starts to settle, we actually find that the scenery's changed. And sometimes we need that in order to create that kind of human evolution, that evolution of the psyche. So as we change that perspective, is looking at it from a deeper angle, got more depth of perception into it, depth of clarity and understanding. And we need to go back to those moments, like I say, to nurture the contraction. Now, when I work with people doing inner child work, what I do is I take them back as the adult. So I'm not taking you back to be 3, 4, 5, 6 years old when the original event happened. That's not going to help. That's just going to re-traumatize you. But what I do is I take you back as the adult, and you get to be the parent that you wished you always had. So it will be adult you talking to little you, and it will be your opportunity to ask them, what's going on for you? What's happening for you? Tell me your story. And you get to be the non-judgmental, completely open adult that you wished you had. And in that moment, they will tell you their story. And as they tell you your story with honesty, you will get clarity. And from that clarity, you can then explore actually what is it you're still holding on to as a child, which you're still kind of showing up and is still repeating in your world now as an adult. And you can say to the people in your own subconscious mind everything on behalf of the child that needed to be said or done. So you can go in and feel this stuff in the system and know in that tension there are words that need to be said, there are things that need to be done. And you can do that on behalf of the child inside the subconscious mind. So maybe your parents have passed away and you could never have that conversation. You're still angry about whatever that is. That actually inside the subconscious mind, inside the hypnosis, you can actually have that conversation with them. And energetically, your body will react and respond to it as if it's happened. Now, this shows up in different ways with different people because, A, the human brain doesn't know what's real or what's made up, Doesn't matter, because it will still respond. You could think about an argument you had when you were 20 years ago in a playground, and your body would still produce the same chemicals as that moment. But when you start to understand this, that gives you some relief. But also what I've seen energetically is relationships change, because actually you're not carrying the baggage in your head. Those words, you're not thinking the same thoughts about that person. Therefore, the conversation changes shape. My teacher says to me, he calls it making the T's while flicking the V's. So it's like, depending where you're watching the world, but in the UK, this means fuck off. Yeah. There's some history behind that and some understanding to it. But, but that's what it means. But it's like, maybe your mum comes around or your dad comes around and they trigger the crap out of you, and you're just about to go out in half an hour and your dad turns up and you're like, really? Like, in your head, you're like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, I'm just about to go out. Like, come on, people. And you're like, okay, come on in. Like, let's have a cup of tea. And your dad's like, yeah, amazing, thanks. And you're like, fuck. So you put the kettle on because you feel like it's the good thing to do to be a good son or a good daughter. You put the kettle on and you're like, cup of tea, and your dad's like, yeah. And you're like, milk and sugar. Yeah. But what they're actually feeling is this, not the, milk and sugar. Like, energetically, they're feeling the pressure, like the pent-up aggression and annoyance and frustration. They're feeling it in the body language, the energetic flow that's coming out of us, that's measured from our heart waves. They're tuning into that. So when we do this inner work and we release that pressure from the younger parts of us, actually we're releasing that baggage, which just allows us to drop the resentment and the resistance and the pressure, etc. We can show up in a more wholehearted way and say, actually, do you know what? I actually need to go out. Can we book something in for next week? And you can set a clear boundary, and it's done from a place of love and honor and trust to yourself, rather than from a place of, maybe I should be performing here. And I have no boundaries, and I'll just transgress those boundaries and end up showing up in a way that actually doesn't support me or support this relationship. So when we start to look at these things from different angles, we can change that dynamic from the inside. We can release that energy, which then actually proves to the inner child that you are a safe person to be with, because you're being honest and integral. And as a result of that, the inner child goes, I want to be with you. Can I come home with you? And in your head, you go, fuck yes, this is all I've ever been waiting for, is someone to actually pick me up and hold me. And in that moment, you get to hold your inner child like you always wish to be held. And we use music as metaphor. We play beautiful music, all sorts of beautiful inner child healings or wonderful songs, just to kind of create that inner landscape where you can just feel all the love literally pouring out of you into you as the parent, as the child, all at the same time, so that you can let go of that wounding and actually move forward and change those habits and behaviors.
Yeah, and when I met Nathan, he kind of like did a group one for us, which was very very interesting.
Yeah.
It was nice meeting I think I was my 9-year-old self.
Yeah.
And that it was very interesting. And Donna says it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Keith says mirror work is very important. Nikki says, and what do you need right now? Always good to ask your inner child.
Yeah.
And that.
So I'm going to pick up on that last one just
Yeah.
quickly. Is what do you need right now? Sometimes that inner child may not even know that. Like if you ask a child, especially like whether it's a 9-year-old or whatever, or a 4-year-old, it's like, well, what do you need right now? Because that child is carrying, they're a small child with big emotions. The neocortex is shut down because they're in fight or flight. The logic part, the data function of the brain is completely shut down. The blood's being squeezed out of it. It doesn't know how to compute things. It's like, well, I don't know what I need right now. And they go into a meltdown. They don't know how to express themselves. So sometimes it's even about being aware that, yes, it's a bid for connection wherever that child is, whether it's an external child or an internal child, it's always a bid for connection. Excuse me. And then holding that part of us and then kind of just going, okay, actually, I'm just here. I'm right here for you right now. When I'm here for you if you need a hug. I'm here for you to express yourself. Whatever you bring, that's not going to faze me. And this, we talked about this, my teacher, Tom, and friend, and another lady, we talked about this. Nothing can faze me. I have had stuff handed to me, in one-to-one spaces, group spaces, that you would not want to imagine, or even kind of think about or anything like that. Nothing phases me, and at the same time, some of that stuff is profoundly sad, and I have sat and cried with my clients because it's profoundly sad, and there is no two ways about it. That nothing will faze me. So it's the same with the inner child. As the inner child comes in, it's just like, actually, I'm experiencing this, I'm hurt by this, and that's exactly how we meet that inner child, and we just embrace all of them wherever they are. So it's really important we open ourselves to that. We open ourselves to the pain and the heartache that needs to come forward, the feeling that needs to come through for the healing. And we are not fazed by anything they give us, because the moment we are fazed by it and the moment we pull away from it, actually we're showing that child that we're not safe to be with, that we can't bring it. We talked about in parts like, when your child has nightmares and your child comes in and they've got, "Mummy, Daddy, I had a nightmare. I had a nightmare." And it's just like, well, what? Tell me all about it. Like, tell me what your nightmare was. As long as it hasn't got any werewolves in it, because werewolves fucking scare the shit out of me. Okay, I don't want to fucking know about that. Yeah, but what we're doing, by in doing that, is we're actually setting there's a condition to what we're here to hold, and we're creating a boundary. It's like, well, actually, if he's not okay with that, maybe he's not okay with that. Well, fuck, I won't tell him then. And that shuts down, and we close. We lose connection.
Yeah.
Because this is what happens is when we actually experience a trauma, and this is how it kind of feeds into the connection piece, is when we experience a trauma, there is only one trauma. It doesn't matter what name we give it or what we experience with it or how we dress it up in any way, shape or form. There is only one trauma. And that one trauma is abandonment. We feel left out. We feel pushed away. We lose the connection with those significant others. We are now no longer connected. We don't feel safe. We feel like we've been removed from the clan, sent into the wilderness. We have been deserted and left alone. And our body doesn't know how to process it, so it starts putting in the survival adaptations. And what we have is we then have 4 wounds that then feed from this trauma. And those 4 wounds are rejection, humiliation, betrayal, and injustice. And we end up filtering our whole world through those 4 wounds, trying to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe. I will be with this kind of person so that I'm no longer rejected. I will be with this person so I won't be humiliated, or I'll stay away from this kind of person so that I won't be betrayed, whatever it is. And we start building up these different dynamics of this. But we lose that connection to who we are and how we are and those significant people around us. So it's really important we understand this, because that's why it's a bid for connection. So that when we have our small inner children, our small outer children, that we create a space for them to reconnect with us and making it safe for them to connect with us. So that whether they have the words or not to tell them what's going on in their world and what they need, they just feel fucking safe enough to be with us. So that actually we can fold them into that hug. We can give them everything that we wished we'd had.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So thank you very much. You've done a it's been absolutely amazing. And thank you everyone for sharing in that. Now, as you know, I do angel oracle cards and guided meditations. So each week I'd like to ask my guests what they would like me to do for themselves and those watching. So, Nathan, would you like me to do an angel oracle card, do a mini guided meditation?
Angel oracles, always.
Got them in my hand. Amazing, that, isn't it?
Must have known.
must have known somewhere along the line. So, as always, when I do the cards, I don't predict the future with the cards. When I do the cards, it's what you need to know for your highest good at this moment in time. Because even though I work with the past, when we work with the past, it's to heal the past, understand it so it doesn't affect us in the present. And when I take people into the future, it's so you know what your future is, so you're not worrying about the present, because the present is all that we really need.
And it is. And I want to add into that just one thing. There's a process that I do with people, which is actually a future progression. So actually what we're doing, people talk about the regression work and they're always inner child, past life, whatever it is, fantastic. But actually you can use this same space to do a future progression and take the subconscious mind 12 months, 5 years, 10 years into the future and explore what that possibility is. And there's a lush connection between angel oracle cards, these spaces, and the energy weaved in between them as well.
Exactly, and I love doing future life progression, seeing where people go, and you're never going to believe the card that has just come out, which is
What we got?
absolutely amazing. Rejuvenating rain, clear the past, heal the present.
Amazing.
How how apt is that card really for coming out as validation and confirmation for exactly what Nathan's been saying today. And Nathan, with what you were doing, it's complete it's basically saying that if you can clear the past, you can heal your present, which is it's what we can do.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely amazing. And Nikki has says, this is so interesting and thought-provoking. Thank you, Nathan. And Keith says, lovely night, thank you. All yet the card would be wonderful. Donna says, thank you. And Keith says, future is here now. I've taught this too. Yep, absolutely. So it's an absolutely brilliant card that came out. So, Nathan, do you have any last words of wisdom, any insights or thoughts to leave our viewers?
Do you know what? I'm going to be really selfish and say no. Why?
Perfect.
Because I'm still stewing on that card for me. And yes, it's appropriate for all of us. And I think this is probably where the wisdom comes from. It's like, yeah, I've been sharing all this stuff about people healing their past and creating their present so they can create their future. And I'm still doing my work. Like, my stuff is still coming, especially in eclipse season right now. I mean, the last 2.5, 3 months have been a hell of a roller coaster for many people. Like, I mean, the last 3 years, but it's been really intense these last few months, energetically, psychologically, emotionally, for me and my business, how I'm connecting with people. There's been a hell of a lot of tension, and there's still stuff that I need to clear down from that. So this is just kind of telling me that I need to be kind of making a little bit of shift myself right now.
Yeah, especially with what we were talking about earlier before the show.
Yeah, exactly
Yeah,
that. Exactly
yeah,
that. So
yeah.
yeah, it's all relevant. It's always relevant.
Yes, it's always a reminder. I hope everyone that you've enjoyed this conversation, found it insightful, because I know I definitely have, and definitely need to listen back to the replay. So if people want to connect with you, Nathan, how do they do that?
Couple of ways they can do it. One, you can come to my website, nathansimmondscoaching.com, and there are free guided journeys on there. You can sign up if you want to. Primarily that's focused towards kind of anxiety symptoms, but we're all experiencing kind of anxiety and kind of the need to ground every now and again. So sign up, download them. They're there to be used and to support you or whoever you know on your journeys. Second one is my Facebook group. So if you look for Deeper Healing and Beyond in Facebook, I have a community there which is steadily growing. And every month we do a new moon journey where I take people in using the hypnotherapy to take them on a deep guided process. Again, healing, cathartic, processing, elevating processes. So you can come to those two spaces and find me there. That'd be amazing.
Okay, I will put those links into the comments.
Mm.
And of course, if you're now ready to remember your divine presence and step onto your spiritual multidimensional path, but you feel lost, confused, stuck, or alone, then please feel free to reach out and connect with me, and we can arrange a free video call to discuss where you are now and how you can move forward to take charge of your destiny, to spread your wings and soar. And of course, please feel free to join my weekly newsletter and receive a free future life progression recording where I take you into a future lifetime to gain guidance and clarity on what that you can use in your current life, as well as a couple of other free gifts in there. And again, thank you everyone so much for watching. And I'd like to invite you to share this video, as I'm sure there are more people who feel lost and want to get clear on their destiny just like you. And of course, as always, if you are watching this on YouTube, then please feel free to subscribe and hit that bell button to be notified when the show goes live, or I post new guided meditations. And do check out Nathan's website. And I look forward to seeing you all again, same time, same place next week. Take care. Thank you so much, Nathan, and thank you everyone who's watched the show.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.